Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first podcast of the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Group. We have with us Bill Reichert today, venture capitals at Pegasus Ventures, husband, entrepreneur. So, teacher, you've done a lot of things in your life. Why don't you tell us some things?
Right. Entrepreneur, enthusiast, venture capitalist, yes, husband, father, whatever. Son-in-law, that's a compelling part of my life. But the reason we're here today is that I, pride myself on being an innovation enthusiast. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much what you guys are all about, right? Entrepreneurship and innovation.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And so that's a perfect connection. So, yes. So, right. I started out long ago and far away as a graduate student here at Stanford. I wound up somewhat accidentally starting my own company. Mm-hmm. And so I was doing a project for a VC here, and we were, so I'm dated, this is early 80s, okay? Long before you guys, right?
Yeah.
So this is early 80s. And so before Stanford, I had worked at McKinsey & Company. And at McKinsey, one of my roles was to be doing the data analytics for the M&A group, for the mergers and acquisitions group at McKinsey, which was based in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. So I had all this compute power available to me. So, but the compute power back then, I would get on a PDP-11 that was back in the New York office. So mini computers, kind of time-sharing computers. That was my experience when I was at McKinsey. So then I come up to Stanford. And so the PCs just come out, right? Yeah. So the idea that you could have your own computer was a novel idea. So in high school, I got to play a little bit with computers. Yeah. And then in college, and in college I took a couple of computer courses, but that was not my major. But because of that, McKinsey let me play with their computers. So I get to Stanford and I'm doing this project for these VCs, and I'm complaining about the lack of good computing resource. So they had some PCs, these VCs, they had some PCs. So it's just, the software on these machines is crap. And they go, what do you mean, Bill? Oh, when I was at McKinsey, I had, these powerful applications that I could use to do financial analytics and pro formas and M&A calculations. I wrote a whole program for McKinsey called ARP, the Analytic Ratio Program. And I come to Stanford and, we got a spreadsheet or something, right? And so the VC looked at me and said, well, Bill, why don't you solve this problem? You go, no, I got other things in mind. I said, no, really? Why don't you solve this problem? I said, well, okay. So I took the entrepreneurship course, mm-hmm. And I wrote the business plan, and I go back to the VC, and with my buddy, I had a friend of mine who came up with me to Stanford from McKinsey in LA. So we were doing this together, and we go to the VC, and the VC looks at us and says, okay, tell you what, go open a bank account and then call up Carl and tell him to fill it up. So, okay. Wow. So we were, okay, whatever, however old you are. So we're these young 20-somethings, mm-hmm. And a VC says to us, call Carl and tell him to fill up the bank. So, what's the obvious question?
Although we spend it.
No. What?
What do you mean, maybe?
Well, close. How much is fill it up, right?
Oh, yeah. The word was tough. Yeah.
I didn't know you could fill up a bank. Yeah. So we didn't. So we're looking at each other, and we just, it's called, don't sell past the close, right? Mm-hmm. So we're saying, okay, we'll do that. And so we go out and we look at each other and go, I wonder how much fill it up is.
You don't want to go back in and ask.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
Oh, I do that.
So in any case, we called him Carl, and Carl told us, and it was $600,000.
Okay.
So
Was that your seed stage?
one call close, right? I thought this venture capital thing, that's pretty easy.
Yeah, pretty easy.
Okay, fine. We write a business plan in our spare time. We go VC, we get $600,000. What's everybody talking about, right? So that's how I got hooked on Silicon Valley and startups and becoming an entrepreneur.
That's an amazing story.
And so the company took off like a rocket, and then we got this contract to develop the Dow Jones accounting series. So we were the first fintech application development company. That was what our company was. So the creative name of the company was, we called ourselves Software Ventures Inc. Right?
Classic.
How about that?
That's the point of
pretty basic. And so basically what we discovered, originally we had mapped out this whole suite of financial applications. And what we discovered was that there were these other companies, they wanted financial applications. And so Charles Schwab came to us and said, hey, we think it'd be great to have a money management app for the PC, for our customers. You guys know who Charles Schwab is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the biggest discount brokers in the US, right? And boom, so we wrote the money management software application for Charles Schwab. And so we thought, that's a business model. So why don't we do this? Why don't we, instead of building our own apps, why don't we build apps for other people? Charles Schwab, then invested in us, and they brought in Dow Jones. And Dow Jones said, we're thinking of developing the Dow Jones accounting series for the PC. And we said, we can do it. and so we spec out what was in essence QuickBooks. So this is before QuickBooks. Okay.
So you guys made the first QuickBooks.
So we made the first QuickBooks, and then Dow Jones comes in to sit down to do the product specification review, and Dow Jones brings in these big auditors, right? Who are going to bless. Are we up to snuff in terms of? And the auditors look at what we did, and they say, this isn't an accounting package. This is a toy, right? And we said, wait a second. We're talking about a machine that, if you're lucky, has 512K of memory. And by the way, you don't even know if it has a hard drive. So you load it using floppy disks. Do you guys know what a floppy disk is?
I don't know.
I have no idea.
You have no idea what a floppy disk is?
I do know.
I mean, maybe because I don't know in English.
Wow.
You know what it is?
No,
César,
I've heard
paga la
of it.
tele.
My dad told me.
Mando ese de ahí.
In any case, but it is so what we're struggling with. Should I stop or
No, that's okay.
let's
You
go.
just turn that off. Go ahead.
Oh, well. So in any case, the accountants, it's Dow Jones, and it's Big Four accounting firm, and it's this is professional, blah blah blah, and we say, guys, I get it, but this is a PC, right? This is not a mainframe computer. And so they say, yeah, but we can't put the Dow Jones name on something and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So it's going to take longer, Yeah. And so they gave us an extra $2 million. And we tried to make this thing work. And I tell you, it was a nightmare experience when I happen to be, they let me go on vacation. So I'm in upstate New York by the lake with my family, and my uncle-in-law brings the Business Week magazine for the week and opens it up and says, "Look, Bill, you're in Business Week."
How did that feel when being that young early in your career to start realizing, wow, I'm doing all these great things?
Well, okay, so here's this 8-page spread announcing the Dow Jones Accounting Series, powered by, we changed our name to Trademark Software, powered by Trademark Software. And I'm going, guys, we can't ship. It's not ready. It's not going to work. And they put it in Business Week that they were, it was supposed to release August 1st, right? And so panic phone calls, how are we, so roughly around, when was it? Like August 20th or something like that. The Dow Jones guys walk in and say, so either you give us the $2 million back or we're taking over the company. I go, what? Who signed that document? I missed that. I missed that.
Did you raise on preferred?
I did. Well, so so basically, poof, it all went away like that. So I went from being worth millions of dollars on paper, to poof.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to explain to my then fiance, who thought I was this, rich young entrepreneur.
Okay.
I said, well, I'm not that rich. So the good news is that she married me anyway.
So it's a win.
And we're still happily married, 3 kids. And the other good news is that the great thing about Silicon Valley is you can crash and burn, and you just pick yourself up and you dust yourself off, and then you spin the story a little bit.
Yeah, always.
And then you go do it again. 100%. So I got to do it again, and another ex-McKinsey guy grabbed me and said, "Hey, Bill, there's this company that's crashing and burning, and the board thinks because you know all about crashing and burning, maybe you can help."
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that's one way of looking. So we went in together to try to turn this company around, and this time it worked. And the company took off, and we went public. And I thought, I've cracked the code. I understand entrepreneurship, and now I've totally got this. And so I jumped into another company that had the coolest technology I'd ever seen. And if you want, I can tell you the story, but we ran that company into a brick wall at 500 miles an hour.
Okay.
So I got a little humility. And did it again, took that company public, and then decided, okay, let's try something new. Let's try something different.
2 out of 4. It's pretty.
Yeah, not bad.
Pretty good.
So I happened to get a call from a friend who said, "Hey, Bill, how'd you like to start a venture capital firm?" And I thought, that sounds like that could be fun. And so got together with Guy Kawasaki and a few other people, and we started Garage Technology Ventures with the idea of being a totally different kind of venture capital firm. And so this is what we were talking about before. The big idea behind Garage was we wanted to be the most open, the most outreach-oriented venture capital firm in Silicon Valley. And, back then, and still to this day, venture capital kind of feels like an old boys network, and kind of feels like you had to know someone to get inside. And it kind of was, there was this magical aura, on Sand Hill Road, and you would have to crawl up and down Sand Hill Road and beg for money and whatever. So we just opened the doors. We said, we're not going to Sand Hill Road. We're going to be in downtown Palo Alto. Cool. Not that that's that much, but at the time that was radical, right? Yeah. At the time it was radical to be not on Sand Hill Road. And we were the first venture capital firm to accept entrepreneurs through the internet. Okay. So believe it or not, it was crazy. Believe it or not, the way to get to a VC back then was if you were lucky, they would say, okay, send me your business plan. And you would FedEx a business plan to Sand Hill Road.
Yeah.
And, you would walk into, we were funded by Sequoia and Mayfield and Draper Fisher Jurvetson and Silicon Valley Bank and whatever. And so we would go over to Sequoia, and there were like these piles of FedEx envelopes on their desks. And we thought,
They didn't even open it.
well, that's kind of crazy,
Yeah.
And so we opened a website and put up a form and said, screw the FedEx envelopes, just tell us what you're up to.
You got flooded with emails.
And so that was the crisis.
Yeah.
So the first 3 years, the first 3 years of Garage, we got over 100,000 business plans.
Whoa.
So, the guys at Sand Hill Road, they were kind of proud, we get over 2,000 plans every year. Aren't we special? We go, we get like 5,000 a month. Oh, really? So that was a little crazy.
I think you went through all of them.
It was gruesome. And we, because we had to tell the world we look at every single plan.
Yeah.
We had to say that.
Yeah.
What's different about that? Right?
Well, I mean, right. That was part of what was different. And, some of our VC buddies would say, yeah, we don't look at anything that comes in over the transom. Really? So
how many of all of those actually made it?
Well, and that was the issue, right?
Of the electronic ones, to say it like that.
Right. And so we realized that, oops, we were in trouble here. How do we get through all of this? And so we hired a bunch of associates, and we tried to figure out a way to get through the stuff efficiently and, filter through. And then what we realized is we had to change the form. And basically, we would have a short form to figure out, are you insane or not?
Yeah.
And then a long form if you weren't insane.
Uh-huh.
And so it turns out that, roughly 80% of entrepreneurs back then, not today, right? But roughly 80% of entrepreneurs are delusional, right?
Yeah.
Try to see who work online and let me see if I can get 200,000.
So that helped a little bit, but still, we wanted to make sure we lived up to our values, that we were going to be the most open VC. But, at one point, Guy, comes to me and said, Bill, do you realize that it's our job to say no to 99.95% of the entrepreneurs we connect with? I mean, that was our percentage. It was to say no to 99.9. I mean, so it was, that's one way to look at it, Guy. But on the other hand, with Bootcamp for Startups and our website and our model, we're giving 100,000 plus entrepreneurs a developmental experience, right?
Yeah.
And so we would frequently we launched this program called Bootcamp for Startups, which we thought, would be, a nice little kind of way to do event marketing kinds of things.
Yeah.
And it just took off. The world was desperate for this conference. Back then, there were not conferences like that. This is before TechCrunch and before South by Southwest and whatever else you can think of. And so, the world was desperate for it, and companies like IBM and Microsoft and a whole bunch of other companies were eager to sponsor, to get on stage. And so we wound up making a fortune on conferences, and we're kind of going, wait a second, that's not the business model.
Yeah, but
that wasn't the idea.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea was to find, the idea was for us to be the farm team for Sand Hill Road.
Okay.
That's why Sequoia and Draper Fisher and all these guys funded us, so that we could find these early stage startups, what we now call pre-seed, but that they couldn't bother with.
Yeah.
Right. And so Sequoia would tell us, there are 20, anytime a new technology emerges or a new sector emerges like that, there are going to be 20 plus startups that are going to jump in and launch products, and they're going to get some funding from angels. And so we can't bother playing at that level.
Yeah.
So wouldn't in terms of the customer market opportunity, and then take them to Quadris on Sand Hill Road and present them to the VC world. So we would get 100 VCs in the room the second Tuesday of every month or whatever. We get 100 VCs in the room. So we were the first accelerator.
Okay.
But we would accelerate these companies one by one. And then Y Combinator comes along and we're watching, what Paul Graham is doing. We're thinking, oh, that's interesting. He's doing them in batches. Yeah. How do you do it in batches? So that was our big miss, right? It didn't occur to us that you could do them in batches.
more possibilities to get one sticking kind of like in a power line.
Right. I mean, you could just do much more quantity, right? If you do it in batches. So we were doing it one by one, and we still, we would still do 35 a year, which was a lot for a small fund, right? But, they were doing initially batches of 20 twice a year, and then they scaled that up. So in any case, we went, a guy and I went over to talk to Paul about maybe we merge. And so we were going to have lunch to talk about, some idea for merging. And we're walking into the building and Paul comes out and he says, guys, I appreciate you coming over, but I got to tell you, I just signed a deal this morning with Sequoia. What?
This morning?
Wait a second. Sequoia's our LP. And they went behind our back and it went, so in any case, so that was another big miss.
At some point, I have a
question.
Garage got bought by Pegasus. And Pegasus
right. So fast forward many years, and
how long ago?
And so that was like 2016, whatever, is when I ran into the Pegasus guys, and they had this incredible global platform. So we were still a small fund, right? We were still focused on seed. Pegasus is focused globally on all stages, all technologies. So I go, wow, this is a much bigger, more interesting platform. And so we thought, okay, what the heck? Being a seed fund in Silicon Valley was no longer a novel kind of opportunity, but being a global fund focused on strategic investing for a network of corporates, that was a really interesting platform. And my partner wanted to do an expansion of the event business into this Startup World Cup program. And then we created this Pegasus University program for corporates, and now this Harvard Accelerator for Harvard alums. And so it's a much bigger platform. So I get to do a lot of really, really, really interesting things. And, the dirty little secret is that being able to go all over the world and work with all these startups and work with all these corporations, I just learn a ton. I've just learned a ton thanks to the Pegasus platform. That's what I hope to give back to the entrepreneurs I work with, to the corporates I work with, to the other investors that I work with, to the students that I work with, and so, that's what I get to do. And I consider myself very lucky.
So seeing as though now, like, a lot of companies are laying off employees, not a lot of research.
Really?
And Twitter, Facebook.
I'm kidding.
Like,
No.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
And definitely like the lack of research and development within those companies focused on cost cutting and basically shareholder appreciation. And how is your, like, as a VC, how is your role so important to basically present those businesses to get acquired, to go public, like how important is your role within that stage?
Okay. So I'm trying to map, the big tech companies laying off people with my role funding startup companies.
Exactly.
And you're saying in the olden days, the big companies would acquire my companies and that was my exit, right? And now they're not acquiring as much, and therefore, what are we doing? Is that the question?
How are you basically empowering other startups to get acquired or go public? Like what was sort of
Yeah. So I mean, again, venture capital is not a quarter by quarter kind of game, right? And so, last year we did more investments than we've ever done in 1 year. So we just keep growing and keep investing because our time frame is 6, 8, 10 years or longer. So we're not now. Your point being, okay, so we have companies we funded 5, 6, 7 years ago who are getting more mature, and so what about their prospects? And so one of the things that was a big deal that not everybody was able to pivot fast enough was that sort of up through 2021, depending on what sector you were in, different sectors were more or less flush in terms of venture funding. But up through 2021, cash was cheap, right? It was easy to raise money, and so the model was, since the cost of capital was low, take as much capital as you can and grow as fast as you can, because ultimately your value is a function of your size, not a function of how much money you raised. Now, obviously, those are correlated, right? And so some companies, never figured out how to get to profitability, right? And so they had so much cash that they could keep buying growth, but they did not have the mechanism to then adjust when the market shifted. So what you saw was a lot of companies who, had to do radical cutbacks, or in some cases failed, because they couldn't adjust to the new market. But other companies, I won't name names, but in any case, so we had a board call this morning with one of our companies that was exactly this model in terms of cash was cheap. They raised a ton of cash. They took off like a rocket ship. And fortunately, the team was sufficiently disciplined about understanding the underlying metrics of what makes a business sustainable, that they realized they always had a model for, if the music stops, what are we going to do to make sure we got a chair, right? And so the music stopped, right? And so they said, okay, this is what we do. Boom, 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 boom. So, they had to cut roughly half of the staff. They eliminated direct marketing entirely. They switched entirely to affiliate marketing. So the revenues went down somewhat, but now they're profitable. Right?
How does this affect their customer acquisition cost? Because they switched
Well, and that's so funny that you should say that, because that was exactly my question. So, okay, how are you monitoring customer acquisition cost? And they said, well, really, we don't measure customer acquisition cost anymore because we're not spending any money on customer acquisition, right? Yeah. What we do is we partner with all of these other, adjacent businesses and platforms, and we cross-sell with our partners. So, so the acquisition of a partnership, that takes some resource, right, to get a new partner. But that partner has, tens of thousands of customers, some of whom are qualified customers for our company. And so, they were pointing out to me that the traditional concept of how you measure customer acquisition cost doesn't apply to them anymore. So their customer acquisition effectively now it's dramatically cheaper. Their customer acquisition cost is now dramatically cheaper. And so that's how they got to profitability. Right. So that was, the unfortunate part was that the effect of cutting out direct marketing, they were buying customers before and hoping that someday they would pay for themselves. but now they decided, to wait for 18 months for a customer to pay for itself. It was not a game they could play anymore because of the capital requirements. So that was, so it was brutal. It was brutal, but now they're able to get to, so now they're cash flow break even. So that means they're in control of their destiny. And so what I was taught, way back when, my fourth company, we raised a pot of money from Excel, big VC firm here. And one of the partners at Excel, we're having a celebratory dinner and we're having here we go, all right, we're partners now, whatever. And after the dinner, sort of we're walking out to the parking lot, and one of the partners turns to me and says, "Bill, I just want to tell you, don't ever run out of money."
Well said.
And it was like, whoa, okay. I wasn't planning on it, but I sort of got the message there. But so that was really, that was, and a really not pivotal. It was just a very memorable moment in my entrepreneurial life.
What year are we talking about?
So that would have been 92.
Okay.
That would have been 92. And it was like, walking out to the parking lot, he just drills into me. This, his look was just so.
You couldn't tell the whole dinner. He was waiting to tell you that.
That's an interesting point.
If it came like that, then he probably thought it throughout the whole day.
I think, again, he wanted to be, he wanted the dinner to have this sort of positive thing, but he wanted to leave me with that little dessert. And he did. No, and no, but it's interesting. I don't remember the dinner at all. I just remember walking out to the parking lot, and this guy. So, and fast forward, he's endowed a building at Stanford. He's endowed a building at Harvard or whatever. I think he's on the board of trustees of Harvard now. Or he was. And so he's done pretty well for himself. Mm-hmm. So he obviously had, he was obviously a smart guy. And, of course, how many IQ points does it take to figure out don't run out of money?
That was a good point to start.
Great point.
What other specific questions?
Yeah, so I got one. I have
Okay.
one. It's just to take advantage that we are in this theme right now of losing money. But last year, Silicon Valley Bank, when it went bankrupt, when all this happened, did it affect you directly or in some kind of way?
Well, in very much some kind of way. The amazing part of the story is Thursday night, whatever that Thursday night was, March 8th or 9th, I was doing a workshop in the Kellogg Theater at Silicon Valley Bank on Tasman Road.
Oh, wrong.
And so it was the night before they were shut down. We did not. So there, I'm talking to my Silicon Valley hosts, and there's all sorts of craziness going on. So the craziness started, I think it started Monday or Tuesday that week is when the craziness started. Mm-hmm. And so everybody's calling up saying, "How do you get your money out of?" And I'm telling my partners, "Guys, don't worry. There's no chance in the world that they're not going to bail out Silicon Valley Bank." And my partners were not quite as sure. Of course, my partners, I've got Japanese partners or whatever, but I'm there Thursday night, and they still held this event, mm-hmm. And I'm talking to my the guys there, the Silicon Valley Bank guys, and I said, "So what's going on?" Open-ended question. Wanted to hear. And they said, "Well, we think the market is overreacting." Mm-hmm. I said, "Oh, so you think when the market opens tomorrow, I should buy some Silicon Valley stock?" And they said, "Well, we probably shouldn't comment on that." So no, it was crazy. It was a rainy night. And the next morning people were lined up. They announced that they had shut it down. They weren't going to open the bank. And, they shut it down that Friday morning. And so somebody mentioned to someone that, hey, Bill was there last night, talk to Bill. And so this reporter calls me up and says, I hear you were at Silicon Valley Bank last night. What's going on? Whatever. And what? So so we had money at Silicon Valley Bank. I mean, so I said, there's nobody who has an account at Silicon Valley Bank who has less than $250,000, right? I mean, so FDIC.
That was the amount for the FDIC, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I have a question about that. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah.
Go.
Yeah, about just the formation of the bank, right? Silicon Valley Bank.
Yeah.
It's not an institutional bank. Like, it's not a traditional bank.
Well, it's not traditional. It is institutional, but go ahead. All right.
Also qualified as one of the shadow banks, right?
It's a shadow bank. Yeah. Why would you call it a shadow bank?
Because I believe that it's not like governmentally or like FDIC does not like.
No, it's fully regulated.
Is it regulated?
Yeah. No, it's fully regulated. I mean, it's fully regulated bank. FDIC protected the whole thing. It's overseen.
Continue. It was 220 and 50,000, and you were saying
much more than that. But right. I mean, the point being to the reporter, given that everybody. I mean, so the concept of FDIC is originally the concept was 98% of depositors have less than $250,000 in any given bank. In any given bank, right? And then you've got the corporate accounts and whatever, and they can take care of themselves, right? They shouldn't, a corporation should not be like keeping cash in a checking account, whatever. I mean, they can, but depending on their whatever. So the assumption is corporates are savvy, they can take care of themselves, so they shouldn't be able to manage their money so it's not at risk. And then individual depositors, they're not going to have 250,000. We'll protect them. They shouldn't have to manage the risk of a bank. That's the theory of FDIC, right? And so then Silicon Valley Bank happens, and you had these two bizarre circumstances. One was that I'm sure there are some accounts that are less than 250, but the entire bank is built on these deposits of millions of dollars, right? Of, startup companies and whatever. One, and two, every depositor is digital savvy, right? Every depositor, knows how to ACH wire your money out like that on the website, right? So think of a typical bank with typical customers, a typical mid-American bank with a mid-American customer base, mom and pop don't know. How do we wire? How would we wire? What would we do? Right? How would we, we got to go open another account at another bank. How do we go? You're right. But everybody at Silicon Valley Bank had another account at another bank anyway. Right. So they were able to move money out like that.
Yeah.
And so you had this just, unnatural sort of acceleration of a run on the bank.
And so that could be also because, the connections right now are much faster than they were before social media and everything. The information just runs.
Right. Exactly.
So are you scared right now that it can happen again?
No. Well, yes and no. So the dirty little secret that nobody seems to be talking about, somebody must be thinking about this, is that clearly FDIC is broken. That whole concept is broken.
No,
so basically,
able to decide whether to bail out a bank.
Well, right. So basically now, the Treasury and the central bank, they've basically got to figure out how to make sure that a bank does not become insolvent. And if something happens screwy, there's zero question they've got to bail out the bank. You cannot bail out banks.
They let all these regional banks fail and they bail out the big banks. So how does that, what's the symmetry in that?
No, if you noticed that, the government so there were 3 banks that got in trouble, or 4, I don't know, whatever. And the government just bailed them all out. Boom, boom, boom. Right? They could not pick and choose. And they couldn't say, now, if a regional bank or another bank, conducts corrupt practices or whatever, I mean, then you're going to have a different circumstance. But, Silicon Valley Bank was basically just stupid. I mean, their assets, their business was not bad. I mean, so their loan book was perfectly good. What got them in trouble was not their loan book, right? What got them in trouble was that they couldn't lend out all of the money that was deposited at the bank.
So they bought bonds.
So they had to buy bonds. So they buy Ginnie Mae's or Fannie Mae's or whatever they bought, that were, perfectly good securities, but the way banking accounting works.
So do you think that because banking was designed on an earlier stage with information didn't flow as fast and people didn't have that much access,
Right.
that quick access to computers like you mentioned,
Right.
people being tech savvy, that now we're facing a serious risk with this happening again because of the unnatural acceleration of the decline of the bank happening.
Right. But again, think about it. Most depositors in most banks are covered by the FDIC. So, there's no reason to panic. It's just the small number of depositors that have big accounts that have to move some money out. And so, so this, the percentage, and this is back to the stress testing question, right? And so the Treasury's got to go through and stress test all these banks to see how out of balance the depositors are relative to the FDIC protection and what that means in terms of capital requirements and also in terms of, their risk strategy, risk management strategy. But, looking back, everybody said, you guys were idiots for buying bonds when interest rates were going up. I mean, that's stupid, right?
Do you think these problems, these liquidity problems, these transparency problems will all be solved with the involvement of blockchain in the future?
Not at all. Blockchain has nothing to do with Silicon Valley Bank and credit problems.
But the thing is, there was this bank term funding program, right? That is finishing right now in March, I believe so. Okay. The bank term funding program, where they give liquidity to the banks in order to
the Fed window, making available liquidity, if a bank seems like it might be near the edge of insolvency. So they're going to have to keep doing that if the market requires that they keep doing it.
But they already said that they are not going to keep doing it.
Well, because they want to tell the banks, you guys get your act together.
Yeah, that's what
but they can't say, if there's another problem, we'll do it again.
Yeah,
they can't say that. Yeah, but they're going to have to do it, right?
But maybe not this time, right? That's always what's going to happen.
Yeah,
is that always what's going to happen? That they say that they just.
I mean, you're right. This. What do they call it? Moral turpitude? No, they don't. What do they call it? There's, again, this is, the big bankers general, there's enough reason for bankers to be careful, right? Even if they think that if bad things happen, they'll be bailed out, they're certainly going to be taken out back and shot, right? So as a banker, you're not going to play the game that says, I can take all the risks I want because I don't have to worry, I'll be bailed out. And that's the anxiety of leaving that window up, that facility open, is the bankers think, worst case, I can always just go, to the Fed and they'll give me a bunch of money. So they've got to shut that down. They've got to get the bankers to start, towing the line in terms of the truth being, no, Silicon Valley Bank did not lie at all. So this was, I would tell you, this is the weird part about the market that I still don't have a good answer for, which is, so that weekend, right? So they shut it down. Everybody's calling. That weekend, that Saturday, I go look at their 10K, right? Their annual filing that came out. It came out January 20th. They filed a 10K, and you look at the balance sheet, January 20th, this is now March 9th, 10th or whatever, right? That we're talking about. January 20th, you look at the balance sheet that they filed on January, they say, oh, they're insolvent. You could just read, if you know how to read a balance sheet, you could read that they were insolvent. Now, the way bank accounting works, what they're able to do is they're able to say, we're not going to mark all of our bond assets to market. And so the GAAP accounting for their bond assets were at cost. But then there's a footnote. Right there, there's a footnote that says, yes, our net capital is $16 billion. But if we marked our bonds, right there in the footnote, if we marked our bonds to market, we'd have to deduct $18 billion.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, they got to sell it.
So right there, you could see they were $2 billion underwater. On January 20th, they reported that.
Wow.
You know, nobody hid anything.
Yeah.
And what I don't understand, and I've asked my buddies on Wall Street this, how did this go, you know, sort of unchallenged? Now, one of my buddies said, well, you know, we very, very, literally he said, you know, we very, very carefully made sure that we didn't put any money into Silicon Valley Bank stock. You know, and there were a few other banks that the same, but nobody, you know, nobody set up a flare and said, hello. But so there were a bunch of people who very quietly, but it wasn't until like March 2nd or 3rd or something like that, that one of the VC, I don't know, what was the trick?
The Arab, like the PIF.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It was the Saudi fund?
Yeah, they leaked it.
Really? Okay, they were the ones who shouted the alarm?
Yeah, they leaked it out on Twitter.
That was, okay. And then all the VCs who were, you know, nobody reads 10K, right? I mean, all the VCs said, oh, guys, get your money out fast. So all the VCs told all of their accounts, get your money out fast. And then, boom, you know, you had people, one of our entrepreneurs said she was on the website for, you know, for hours and hours and hours, just trying to get in to wire her money out. Wow. And she was able to wire some of the money out, but she got it out of one account, but she couldn't get it out of the other account. And so she was like $2 million in the hole. And she was like, and I said, you know, don't worry, they'll bail you out. It'll come, you know, it'll take a while, but, you know.
Isn't this concerning to you that this is happening when we have AI so powerful, we have quantum computers, we are evolving as society in a very good level, but at the same point, we have these problems in banking?
Well, that's again,
people have their money.
You know, I don't, well, I mean, I do think the thing that's, I think, a little scarier than that, well, I'm not sure, you know, in terms of computers and AI, you know, is the potential for, you know, for computers to, you know, you see these mini crashes that happen in stocks and on markets, and you know, thus far the damage that's been created has, you know, been manageable in terms of, you know, these computer glitches, quote unquote, or whatever, whether they're malware or glitches. So you know, I agree that it is of great concern. But it's,
what do you mean malware or glitches? Now, I mean, like, if technologies, like, we have a very powerful world right now where society is working very good, but at the same time, I'm not talking about AI, but I'm just talking about we are having problems in the banking system that can be solved, and they are not solved. And at the same time, we're doing other things pretty good, but these problems are not solved.
Well, what we've learned, what the global financial crisis taught us. So we did the wrong thing in the global financial crisis. You know, we did not bail out Lehman. You know, it would have been so much cheaper, you know, and then, you know, suck it back in over time. That's what we learned. And so when Silicon Valley Bank came along, you know, the Fed said, we're not going to do that again. We are not going to let these guys fail, because if these guys fail, then all the banks associated with the tech world are going to fail. Right. And so there was like, okay, we're not going to make that mistake again. We will just bail them out. We're going to tell them, don't worry, everybody's going to get their money back. We're going to fire the CEO, but you'll get, and all the shareholders, you're going to all lose your money. But depositors, you guys are sacred. And so now, basically, you think about it, it's, yes, so you could lose banks and shareholder value, right? I mean, so if banks screw up too bad, then shareholders could lose a lot of money. But as long as the depositors are protected, the banking system, you won't have this ripple effect. And so, what we didn't fully appreciate in the olden days is that, that in certain circumstances, printing trillions of dollars is okay.
It's not. It's never okay.
And then you're going to have
right?
problems.
So you think it's never okay, but you're wrong. I mean, think of what would have happened if, and we didn't do it in the global financial crisis, and that cost the world, enormously.
I mean,
right?
when we printed the most is in wars.
That's part
true. That when the United States printed the most money was in wars, was more than any.
Well, no, the United States has never been bad at printing money because through all the wars up until 1972, we were on a gold standard. So we couldn't print money because, so prior to the gold, the 19th century, American banks printed money. And so what happened was, people would start banks, they would issue,
IOUs.
What was the word for currency? There was a different word for, so.
Okay, go ahead.
Let's get back into disruptive technologies.
Yeah.
Making
Good. Yeah.
And, you mentioned before, like you get to see all kinds of companies developing. I'm sure a bunch of them are touching on this quantum computing.
Right.
And she has a lot of questions about that.
Oh, good.
Go ahead.
A lot. But
what?
So just to be clear, quantum computing means that you no longer think in terms of 0 and 1, right?
Well, that's not all, but yes, it enables you to compute using a non-binary approach.
A mini state like in between.
Yes.
And this is so you can make more calculations that are faster, which means mostly in AI, right?
Well, no, in any calculation.
Well, like AI needs fast calculation.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. So do you invest more in technology or application oriented?
So this is a great question. So what should you invest in? Should you invest in technology? Should you invest in application? Should you invest in markets? Should you invest in people? What should you invest in?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody? I'm trying to be Socratic here, okay?
I can go right.
give you something.
Okay. What should you invest in?
What is going to
What?
be what's going to have a good value proposition for the customer, something that the customers are going to use, something that people, because there are a bunch of technologies out there that are not going to, or at least are being held up because of they're not converting into something you can sell to people because they're going to need it and they're going to use it.
Thank you so much. So I can't tell you how many groups I have asked that question to, and I've struggled to get anybody to give me the right answer. So I was teaching a class at Stanford last summer, and I had 60 students, executive MBA students, right? So these are all people who've worked at companies. And I said, what's the single most important criterion for investing in a company? And, I got like 13 different answers before somebody said compelling value propositions.
Yeah. You come to the NI group, you got it first time.
Way to go, you guys. Way to go. So obviously you read the book, right? Is that your point?
Maybe.
No. But yeah, so to your point, I'm sorry, to get back to your point, so we are relatively, we're probably the most prolific investor in quantum computing in Silicon Valley. We've made 4 investments in quantum computing. So, that's a lot for any one technology. Investing in both hardware and software, investing in both superconducting and in photonic and in cold atom technology. So, the presumption is somebody's going to crack the nut and eventually get to a computer that can live up to the promise of quantum computing. And the promise of quantum computing is to have 2 or 3 orders of magnitude more efficient and powerful compute than classical computers using a von Neumann binary sort of coding language, right? So, but you can use it for all sorts of applications, not just AI. So one of the first applications that people are working on is basically modeling molecules, right? So that's not an AI problem. The problem there is trying to figure out, with all of the forces between the atoms in a molecule, how will a molecule fold? So if you invent a molecule, what will it look like in the real world? Because the way it looks...
simulated with a lot of scenarios.
Right. So what it looks like in the real world will determine how it behaves in the real world. What will it attach to? Will it catalyze? Will it ionize? What will happen to this molecule in the real world? And so pharmaceutical companies, chemical companies, a lot of companies are really, really interested in being able to model complex molecules. So on classical computers, you can model molecules up to, I'm not sure where we are right now, but 24, 32 atoms or something like that. But if you invent a new molecule that has 100 atoms in it, it's impossible to model it in a classical computer.
I heard a quantum computer with 32 bits has as many parameters as all the atoms in the universe.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Really? Okay. Interesting.
And they even created a new state of matter with applying the Fibonacci sequence to quantum computer. We were discussing that the other day. Like nobody spoke about that. It's very insane. Maybe you can that was done already on quantum computing. So I'm guessing that quantum computing is gonna be the next hype in investment after AI, because I feel like once it combines with AI, then you can give AI all the data that you can, and then you are gonna be able to analyze all the data that probably AI is not able to analyze. So how does that affect how we collect data? Is that gonna
we've got plenty of data, and that we can't analyze because there's too much data. There's way more data than there is compute power. Depending on the problem you're talking about, right? So you guys know the traveling salesman problem. Do you know the traveling salesman? Do you remember that?
No.
Decision science. Okay. So you've got a traveling salesman, and they've got some number of products and some number of towns they need to visit. So what's the optimum route for that traveling salesman to go?
Okay.
And so, when I was a kid, you could figure it out if there were 32 towns. Now I think you can figure it out if there are 64 towns, but that's it, right? Now, not that many traveling salesmen go to more than ready. So that's not, but every big global corporation has a logistics problem of, you've got all these SKUs, you've got all these retail partners out there, you've got all these warehouses, you've got some number of trucks and some capacity per truck. How do you optimize the distribution of a product when you've got all of these variables out there? Well, right now, the best you can do is, close enough, right? So, but you can't do the pure math.
You can run all simulations.
Right. Yeah.
So how close are we till somebody cracks the code? You think
you mean for quantum computing?
Not only gets a quantum computing working, but we get quantum computing working for small businesses that look forward to it. So, for example, I have a small business.
Okay.
Would I have a quantum computer that can run with that super advanced AI software
on your phone
or on our phone?
It'll be it'll be I think almost certainly. Where are we now? Okay, so it's 2024. Almost. And I won't speculate that far. But as far as the eye can see, your access to quantum computing is going to be in the cloud.
Yeah, exactly.
So there will be a whole bunch of quantum computers up in the cloud, and you'll be able to tap into them. But right now, you don't need to buy a NVIDIA server, right? You can borrow an NVIDIA server on Amazon, right? So it'll be, and that's the way high performance computing has been for a long, long time. So you have a relatively small number of private companies or independent organizations that have supercomputers. And then the rest of us tap supercomputers through the cloud.
So what year is IBM or these companies are going to crack the code and going to come out with the quantum computer? You think it's going to be before 2035?
Well, right now you can get on an IBM quantum computer through the cloud. So now you can get on it. Now you can't do anything much. You can play with some algorithms and try to get some sense of how they work. But in terms of useful, what we call quantum advantage, right? And so quantum advantage means that for some specific problems, there are some algorithms that you can run on a quantum computer that will be more efficient than on a classical computer. So there are. Google says that they have quantum advantage for some narrow short. I think they're claiming now that they have quantum advantage for random number generation. I think that's what Google said. It's something like that. So one of our companies is working on quantum advantage for this issue of protein folding. They are saying that they can accelerate using their quantum-inspired algorithms. They're saying they can accelerate the modeling of molecules by a factor of 10 to 100. So that's, not close to where we hope to get to with full quantum computing, but they're saying, because of this so-called quantum-inspired algorithm, that alone is accelerating, accelerating over classical. So, but again, everybody is hoping that quantum will accelerate artificial intelligence, right? Will give us the ability to, will give us the ability to do these massive computations for much, much, much cheaper. It won't be.
And much faster. That's the thing. That's what I'm thinking. When you're able, what I want to know is, when is it going to happen that AI is going to be able to run through all these possible scenarios?
Well, so it's a really interesting question. How many parameters do you need to replicate reality?
Yeah,
in terms of generative
and simulate it multiple times to see what's the better path.
So arguably, I will tell you, right now, the worst large language model is much better at English than most of my associates. Oh shit. Okay. All right. Okay. Could we delete that? Let's say right now, the worst large language model is better at English than your average Harvard freshman.
Agreed.
Is that better? Is that better? Okay, that's better. So and it's true. And it's true.
So no need for when we get that quantum computing power, they be able to.
Well, and so and a really interesting question is, do you need quantum computers for most AI applications? Maybe not.
But it will be you will increase the power, the intelligence, basically, because you can run through much more scenarios.
Well, then, right. So there are problems that you can get from quantum computers will get us from 96% to 98% or something like that, right? But for most of the stuff that we're talking about, now the question is, what will it open up? So the idea of a GPT, of a transform, so the idea of a transform is this concept that was developed a long time ago. So the concept of a transform was developed a long time ago, but people realized, oh my God, we don't nearly have the compute power to do it. It's a sort of a, I don't know, it's sort of a variation on the traveling salesman problem. But you've got all these variables, which are words in a paragraph, which are words in an article, which are words in a book. Mm-hmm. You've got all these variables, and you're trying to optimize across the meaning of all these words across, right? As opposed to, sort of taking each word or each sentence and taking it apart, right? So it's easy to replicate a sentence in a large language model. It's hard to replicate a book, right? So quantum computing will enable us to do some stuff that we can't even, we cannot do now. And that's the interesting thing for you guys to figure out. What do you want to do that you can't do now?
Yeah. Maybe run the new Apple Vision Pros with multimodal generative AI.
Okay, to do what?
Change the reality at the same time that you are watching it.
Okay.
So
to what end?
I got a good one.
Well, okay.
This goes into a very interesting path that it's where are we going in 20 years? How important really is the Apple Vision Pros?
Yeah.
And the improvement of this technology? Is this really gonna let people indoors all the time, living fake lives with AI, quantum computers? What we're talking about, creating a reality that doesn't exist.
Right. The Vision Pro, I agree with you, but I believe they don't have not nearly as many apps to.
Okay, but in 5 years,
that's your opportunity developing for the But after that,
so I'm waiting for you guys to go where. You almost went there. You almost went
so
there.
Let's say you.
So where?
Business.
Quantum computing can enable the matrix, right?
Okay.
So I guess it can simulate, right? And I also can tell me the most efficient way. Like if I give it all my information right now for my business, I give it my financials. I give it all my CRM, everything. Right. It can basically tell me what is the most efficient way to move forward. And it's the perfect way because you can simulate all the scenarios. So there's going to be a time where we reach.
I don't know, so for example, Netflix recommends things for you, right?
Yeah.
Instagram puts you in
Instagram or TikTok or whatever. They all recommend things for you. Do you think quantum computing will make the recommendation engine significantly better?
More precise, I believe.
I think so because you'll be
precise.
It's very precise right now.
The amount of data. The thing is, the amount of parameters that the quantum computer can carry.
Yeah,
is able to have more precise deductions, right?
But that assumes
more data.
That assumes that you, as a person, that your mood and your, appetites from moment to moment, sort of correlate, right?
Exactly.
I mean. So do they correlate?
I mean, we have behavioral patterns as humans.
Right. We have patterns, but there's also a fair amount of chaos going on, right? So are we as humans, is there some aspect of human behavior that is truly random within the human animal? In other words, right? Because think about it, you've got, billions of hormones and synapses that are kind of interacting, and they're patterns, but are they how deterministic are they? So no matter what, you're talking probabilities, right? No matter what, you're talking probabilities. And so,
but the more data that you get, the more data you're gonna be able to process, combining with IoT. They're gonna have so much
Right.
There's only way more data about humans.
Yeah.
So then if you are able to process that quickly, that's just going to bring the change of, quantum computer is now able to be more precise.
No, it's interesting because we now know the whole human genome, right? And we have the compute power to correlate, disease to genes.
Yeah.
And we're, what we're discovering is that there's something going on such that, two people with exactly the same genome have different, outcomes. Okay. So there's other factors that are involved in terms of, disease and health and whatever. phenotype. And so, there's something in biological systems that adds a degree of randomness that is not the same in chemical systems and physics, So this is one of our issues in terms of investing. It's so much easier to invest in physics and chemistry than in biology, right? Because, biology is just so much harder to figure out, right? And it's so much more random.
Yeah.
And now, so it's, I don't know if it's provable or unprovable that we will ever be able to compute biology in a deterministic way.
Okay.
Right?
Do we get enough variables into it?
Is it because there are too many variables, or is it because is there some true randomness, true sort of entropy in biological systems that will be impossible to perfectly model? So we will be able to model in a matrix sense. We can model human beings and societies in there. We can model, and it would look real. It would look perfectly real, but would it be accurate?
Exactly.
Right. I mean, so you can. That's
like one flap of a butterfly can have an effect. That little precision, that little that you missing can be detrimental.
Might be the variable, right?
Definitely.
And so that requires that not just you have infinite compute, but you've got to have arguably infinite data, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so even if you had infinite compute, you're never going to have infinite data. You're not going to have all the butterflies, right?
Exactly.
Whatever, right?
Okay. I think
Exactly.
if you want, we can switch into a.
Again, this is a very different conversation.
That's why we're now.
Okay. Any more quantum questions? I want to.
Well, I think already had been answered.
Okay.
But the other question I was asking was like, do you think quantum computing was more like a bit like nuclear fusion, that it's potentially big, but it's kind of like logical speaking, cannot really be solved yet?
Right. No, I think that's a really, 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 really good question. And that was when we started investing in quantum. That was the question: is quantum always going to be 20 years away? Right. So that's the wrap on fusion. So believe it or not, again, dating myself, I grew up in Chicago, or outside of Chicago. When I was in high school, we had a visit from a scientist from Argonne National Labs, one of the big national labs, whatever. And this PhD was explaining to us that, by 1984, we'll have fusion. She was so confident that, they were on track and they had figured it out and they knew how it was going to work. And we had these, toruses and magnetrons, or whatever they were called at the time, but tokamaks. So she thought by which was 8 years away at the time. So, dating myself. And so I'm going, wow, this is going to be great. Infinite energy, 1984, right? And so the trope on fusion is it's always 20 years away, right? I don't know, and I still think it's at least 20 years away, in spite of all the progress we've made on fusion. On quantum, I think the curve is somewhat different. I do think the curve is different because we are already seeing, machines that can practically generate output. So, Google has been able to run a version of Shor's algorithm or whatever they did, right? So that means we're beyond the
to get to manage them on a later stage, or what are some of the traits?
Right.
Can you repeat the question, because I think you weren't. Okay,
yeah.
And repeat it and do it a little bit short.
Okay. What are some of the traits that you look for in entrepreneurs for small businesses?
Yeah. So for startup companies, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is a pretty complex topic, and I tend to disagree with a lot of my peers in venture capital. So I get into these battles with some of my VC friends. So I think generally VCs agree that what we're looking for are entrepreneurs who are resilient. Okay. And because of the stress of entrepreneurship, the likelihood you're going to have some failures along the way, resilience is the ability to get back up and keep going, right? And so closely associated with that is I characterize my favorite entrepreneurs as being insanely persistent. But persistence is slightly different than resilience, but you can see why they're, how they're related. And then, so the other thing that related to both is the word scrappy. So scrappy generally means that you are able to get things done efficiently and without too much sort of administrative overhead, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
You just move the moving, yeah.
Right.
Fast.
And so, so sort of the other dimension of it another dimension that is more controversial. I got into this big battle with another VC around the concept of coachability. Coachability. And so that relates to the word, so sometimes you'll hear VCs talk about, you want an entrepreneur who has the right amount of humility. A couple of my VC's friends were saying, you don't want any humility. And, the last thing you want in an entrepreneur is humility, right? So now it depends on what you mean by humility. So what I mean by humility is the awareness that maybe I don't have all the right answers, right?
Awareness. Yeah.
And so I have one of my workshops where, I talk about the top 10 secrets of VCs that entrepreneurs need to know. And one of the top 10 secrets, to just be edgy, is that contrary to popular belief, VCs do not invest in entrepreneurs who are smart.
You mean like academic smart, I guess.
So what I mean is, and generally, yes, when you talk about smart, we all know those people who grew up, they were successful in school and they always had the right answer and all of that. And so the problem with people who are smart is that they think they need to have the right answer. And because they've always been told that they were smart, and so when somebody comes to them with a question, they think they have to have the right answer. And that's a real dangerous characteristic in an entrepreneur. And so, so I suggest it's not about smart, it's about savvy. So the word savvy doesn't translate equally in all languages, but do you guys all know what savvy means?
Savvy would be like, sitting there, looking at a problem and seeing what people you have around you, using them to solve whatever you have in front of you, not necessarily having to do it.
Problem solving. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Like
so
a person who gets it done, basically. Yeah.
Who figures out,
I mean.
And so the classic example of that is right. Somebody who's figured out how to get somebody else to do it for them because they're going to be better at doing it than they are, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the smart entrepreneur thinks, I'm better than anybody.
So you also look for perspective and awareness too, to like understand the whole situation as a whole and thinking, okay, I need to get this done. Let me make sure I get it done the most efficient way possible.
Well, okay, but a smart person can analyze a problem and be a good critical thinker and come up with a strategy for getting things done. And that's what they were trained to do.
Yeah.
Right? A savvy person is more likely to just break the rules.
Yeah.
Okay. And say, right?
Loopholes.
100%.
And
the person who sees the solution that other people don't see.
Well, it just figures that with everything going on here, I'm going to have you do that, you do that. You're going to be better at than I am because I don't, whatever. And whereas the smart person is going to get everything in a room and put together a plan and put together an art, whatever, right?
It's going to take a long time. It's not going to be, it's not going to be done.
And may or may not, right? Yeah. And, and so again, one of the things that I realized as an entrepreneur was broken about venture capital. When I was an entrepreneur, the VC meme was, that you wrote a business plan and you focused on executing the business plan. That was, and when I was an entrepreneur, I had this I was very fortunate, very famous VC, who was an investor and on my board. And he came in one day and said, I've seen the future. Here's the future. And he mapped out what he saw was the future. And so let's focus on this, right? And I, so board meeting over, and I, turned to my co-founder and I said, Jesus, I think he's crazy. What are we gonna do? I mean, so basically, what I realized, as an entrepreneur, is that sometimes you don't know what the right path is. But you can't admit it to the VCs. That was my crisis as an entrepreneur. There we were, trying to figure out how to use the internet. This was my fourth company, was an internet ed tech company, and we did not know the answer at that point. And this guy comes in and says, "I know the answer," and we're saying, "I don't think that's the answer. Maybe it's the answer, but we don't know. So what do we do?" Right? So, so what I realized at that point was, when you're an entrepreneur in your early days, what you're trying to do is you have to be divergent. You've got, sort of this concept of solving a problem. In our case, it was improving higher education. That was my fourth company. It was a company called Academic Systems. And we were going to try to figure out a way to use the internet to make education more efficient. How about that for an idea, right?
That's good, but then
wouldn't that be great if somebody had figured this out? Well, we did. Okay. So, and so, what we were realizing is we don't have the answer. And so we got to go figure it out. And so fortunately, my co-founder, had been the dean of the School of Education at Berkeley, and everybody in higher education knew this guy. So he could walk in any door in any college or university in the United States. And so what we did is we went to CUNY and SUNY and Cal State and UC and University of Illinois and whatever. We went all around the country trying to figure out how to make higher education better. And the guys at CUNY, that's too much story. But the point being, as an entrepreneur, you've got to know when you don't know enough to make a decision.
Okay.
And then when you do know enough to focus. And so that venture capital didn't get that when I was an entrepreneur. So, fast forward, Steve Blank and Eric Ries sort of, canonized that concept. So all us entrepreneurs knew you've got to be divergent before you can be convergent. Exactly. But we didn't know how to explain it to the VCs. And finally, do you know who Steve Blank is?
Steve Blank sounds familiar.
Steve Blank. So Steve Blank is the guy who, so he and Eric Ries get credit for the Lean Launchpad, the Lean Startup Concept.
Okay, the Lean Startup, yeah.
Everybody knows Eric Ries.
Oh, yeah, the Lean Startup. Yeah.
So Steve Blank was Eric Ries's teacher, professor, at Berkeley. And so Steve and Eric, sort of canonized this concept that said, hey, you don't know all the right answers at the beginning. And so VCs, you've got to let these entrepreneurs explore before they converge. And I go, okay, why couldn't I have explained that to these guys? But okay, good. So finally now higher education kind of gets it, right? This idea that you've got to explore before you can make a final decision. So most entrepreneurs, and the reason that Eric Ries is so popular, these sort of concept is so popular, is most entrepreneurs think they have to have the right answer day one. I mean, that's your natural instinct as an entrepreneur, is to say, and we still to this day, we get this every day. The entrepreneur, somehow gets to me and says, I have the right answer, right? And we love high confidence, right? And so another characteristic you want in an entrepreneur is high confidence. That makes sense. Can you have high confidence and humility? I think you can, right? And so so the battle I had with the VC over this humility thing and the coachability thing was, there's not a successful Olympic athlete on the planet who doesn't have a coach, right?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and so why would you suggest that entrepreneurs should not be coachable? How could you possibly have a mindset that says, you don't want coachability in an entrepreneur because that shows a lack of confidence and therefore a lack of commitment and focus, right? No, I mean, right? So that was a long-winded way to get to this.
That's perfect.
Coachability point.
I have a question about
Okay.
the book.
Yes.
So it goes deep into
Showing to the camera.
book. Yeah.
Getting to wow.
Getting to wow. Silicon Valley pitch secrets for entrepreneurs.
So yeah, now that we're talking about the entrepreneur as
Characteristics of a
characteristics of an entrepreneur,
right.
It goes deep into the pitch, right? What it needs in order to be effective. And the two main points that I got out of it,
Okay, I'll be interested to hear this.
are number one,
Okay.
well, it's difficult for some people apparently to understand that a pitch is not a presentation,
Okay.
and that you don't count with the time you do in a presentation on a pitch. You have 30
Good.
seconds to cut the attention.
Thank you.
That's one.
Okay, good.
And two would be that I remember reading this, that most of them are actually lost, or you lose interest during the Q&A session after you pitch your idea.
That was good.
Can you
Elaborate?
elaborate on that? Yeah.
So the first point is it, comes from what I realized when I became a VC and I started listening to pitches, and I heard about this whole cadre of people out there who were called pitch coaches. And I was trying to figure out, what are these people doing? Because all these pitches are terrible. And I was trying to figure out what was wrong with these pitches. And what was wrong is that all these pitch coaches they were actually presentation coaches. And a pitch is not a presentation. So a presentation means you've got a decent fixed amount of time and you can craft a story arc, right?
Yeah. And
so that's what presentation coaches teach, storytelling, the arc of the narrative, blah, blah, blah. And that's great. It's a skill and it's valuable, and all, everybody should know how to do a presentation, right? But a pitch is not a presentation. Yeah. So, and the point you were making that we make in the book is that 90+% of all the pitches an entrepreneur makes are less than 30 seconds. And most entrepreneurs, they said, no, that's not true, Bill. I mean, the shortest elevator pitch competition I ever went to was 60 seconds. And usually they're 2 minutes or 4 minutes. No, you don't get it, right? Every time you open your mouth as an entrepreneur, you're pitching.
Yeah.
So you introduce yourself at a conference, you introduce yourself on Zoom, you meet some, potential customer, you meet some potential recruit, whatever. You are pitching as soon as you shake their hand.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the chance of you getting more than 30 seconds depends upon your ability to convince them that it's worth their while to spend more than 30 seconds with you versus going over and getting some more salami, right?
Exactly.
So that's the core point. And then if you're ever going to go into a VC office, they're not going to sit there and let you do the arc of your presentation.
Yeah.
But if they do, if they do, they've already written you off. But if they do, and that's what I tell entrepreneurs, if they just sit there and listen to you and smile, probably they're actually get their email under the desk. Yeah. It's probably what's happening. But if they just sit there and listen and smile, probably they've already written you off.
Exactly.
But if they're leaning forward and they're asking questions, then maybe you have a chance. Maybe you have a chance.
Isn't it better when they start challenging?
Yeah, you want them to.
Bingo, right? We all know this is true, right?
How important is communication in this then? Because if you're somebody that's electric and can get your attention and they can keep you focused instead of somebody that's monotone. So even you, like as a VC,
yes,
you might not think the idea or the business model is that interesting, but you say, okay, this guy, I like how he speaks, or even without realizing you're listening to him. So how important is communication and being a master of
well, okay. So to finish off sort of the key lessons of the book, the core lesson of the book is, and I guess it didn't quite seep through, is be clear, be compelling, be credible. Did that come through? I guess not. Okay. Yeah. Be clear, be compelling, be credible. And, the point is, if you cannot be clear about what you're doing, then how can I get excited about what you're doing, right? If you are not compelling, then how are you different from everybody else out there and whatever? And if you're not credible, then how can I trust you? Why would I bother spending time with you? So what we're looking for in terms of communication skills is that they know how to get these points across quickly and clear and concisely, a clear statement of what they're doing, a clear statement of why it's compelling, and some evidence that what they're saying is credible. Mm-hmm. And that's the core. To Paul's credit, that's the big idea, right? We're going to give you permission to say that you don't think this is right. We'll talk, we'll explore, we'll ask questions, we'll coach, and you have permission to say. So it happens, it happens that my son got into Y Combinator. And I could have killed him. And he said, Dad, you cannot tell anyone that I'm in Y Combinator. I don't want you to tell anybody about this. Just leave me alone. Just let me do this. So he and a buddy, so they worked at Stripe together. And they had this concept. For logistics, for digitizing certain types of logistics. Okay. Because my son had worked at a logistics company before Stripe. And he thought this company had a good idea, but bad execution. And he thought, hey, this is still a problem. They haven't solved it. I know how to solve it. Let's see if we can get to Y Combinator on a logistics play.